Dearly beloved, welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a really fun and inspiring episode around the topic of sacred storytelling in your business, in your life, in your life's work. And with me today, I have my special guest, Leah Lamb, who is a writer, storyteller, and performance artist who works with story as a tool for social change, healing, and as a doorway to personal transformation. Leah is the creator of the School for Sacred Storytelling, where she teaches a modality of storytelling designed for self-exploration, activation, and learning how to be good humans together. She's toured her healing story ceremonies across the country and is the creator of Soul Stories, a form of mystic storytelling. So we are here to talk about sacred storytelling in business, in your life's work. Leah, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure. I'm so excited to be with you.
So let's just start it off right at the top. What is sacred storytelling? How do
Okay,
you
so
identify it?
yeah, I think first of all, so many of your folks are really geared towards business,
Yes.
and telling their story. And so I just want to start there, like what's a story?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a distinction between what we're doing in our business and what we're doing as storytellers. So I'm going to talk from a storyteller's perspective and just separate the two for a second. So what I understand a story is in a very grotesque way of explaining it. It's like an operating system, and it teaches us our belief systems, our values. It shows us what's possible. And so we're the very first stories of our planet were like creation stories, origin stories. They were the operating manual that guided people in how to live in a good way on our planet. They taught us how the world works. And so stories still do that in our everyday life, and we're telling them around the table and at work and to each other. And if you've got kids, you're telling your stories and hoping that they will teach them how to be good kids. And that to me, when we look at a story and we're saying, well, that's a sacred story. Now we're looking at, well, when I say that something's sacred, I say that I see the life in you. And I honor that there's a life inside you. So now I'm saying, okay, this isn't just an operating manual. This is actually a living being that is here to provide guidance and insight and wisdom for how to live in the world. And so when I'm standing as a sacred storyteller, I know that I'm actually in service to life, that I'm telling a story to serve your life, to serve our life as a collective. And so I love beginning to say that I'm a sacred storyteller because I put on my sacred storytelling goggles, and it's kind of like this heat-seeking missile. Is that a life form giving story, or is that a life form disruptive story? Is that story going to bring us together? Not to say that it can't have conflict and grief and all that kind of stuff. Those can be really sacred stories. Or is that planting fear? Is that planting separation and things like that? So I think it's a really powerful time in the world when there's so much coming at us to be able to distinguish, okay, life force giving, life force taking.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much junk food stuff for all of our brands. I mean, that was the intention behind what we've built at Magic Kids with our app and all of the stories that my son and I write and all the stories that we're publishing and curating and producing for kids to bring them these new stories that have modern spins that help them to identify positive values and morals and to help them anchor into their own inner compass for the world that we're all having to navigate right now. And stories are such a powerful way to anchor people into a life philosophy. I know the most powerful and well received newsletters I send at any time are ones where I'm telling a personal story or the story of somebody I've worked with, because stories just resonate. And why is that? Why would it be that the best form of content I could possibly create is not some how to article? It's not a template, it's literally a story. Why is that the best way to reach and connect with and teach our people?
Because you're connecting. You're not selling. Who wants to be sold something? I had a great thing happen where this really nice guy came to me and he's like, Leah, I'm going to help you do marketing copy. And I'm like, great, I love help. And he said he wrote this marketing copy for me, and all I got back, more than five people wrote back from his marketing copy of stories about why they couldn't afford what I had to offer. You know, it was a get. There was something in it that stunk of get, and we can feel energy. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we come to tell a story, we're in the most generative way being. You gave something. You gave something that's way bigger than your business, way bigger than your program. You gave me a story that that's mine now, that I can carry with me, and there was an act of generosity, and we respond. That's the laws of life, of giving and receiving. And so when you come with a story as a true act of generosity and giving, you can't help but touch people.
Yeah.
And it's like now you're in your soul work, which is so much bigger than their Excel spreadsheet this month. And not that we don't all run by Excel spreadsheets this month, but you're in a bigger story and a bigger way of living. You're living that way.
So, what are some generative ways to use story in business, and what are some gross ways to use story in business or marketing?
Well, and I want to be true to like what I am. It's like there's a lot of people who go out and they say, I'm going to use story for business. And
Yeah.
that's not what I am. So I just want to clarify,
Yeah.
what I can say is the most powerful way to be in the world is when you get to stand in your essence and the gift of your life, and you're generous to share the mess ups, the screw ups when you went out of alignment. And when you do the good work of learning how to give your life lessons away as wisdom stories, as teaching stories. And when you're in the world to give, life responds back and it wants to give back. you know and oftentimes people, when you want to use a story, and I literally cringe, my whole body goes kind of crazy when people say, I want to use a story to sell my business. Well, I'm like, well, it's sort of like you're actually, if you follow the language of use and you get a little creative with your etymology, it'll take you back to a term of slavery. So now imagine that you've got this really awesome being that holds the essence of your soul, has a life all its own, that's way bigger than you, and you want to use it. Well, what's it going to do? The very bare minimum, you know? But I feel like if you want to engage the great gifts that you have and give them, and you want to inspire people, and you want to use one of the most powerful tools on the planet of storytelling to authentically connect with people, now you're living in a good way. But if you're going to use that and there's some TED talk out there where this guy actually teaches people how to consciously manipulate people through story, you're on the wrong side of life.
Yeah.
You're on the wrong side, and the spreadsheets won't add up at the end of the day. And so, I think the one thing I've always learned, I have an online program. It's like, the generative nature of life. We can't escape it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you can be really generous through your stories.
So, do you have any tips for somebody that are like, well, I don't know what stories to tell to help tell the story of my life's work, the story of what I'm here to do, the story of who I'm here to be, which is ultimately what we're all trying to do here is like we're trying to embody the life wisdom that we have flowing through us through the work that we get to do in the world with the people that are aligned to work with us. And so if they're like, I don't know what story to tell, do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, take a walk. Go for a long walk. I mean, to me, the distinction between what you're asking, it's like, is your ego saying, what do I need to tell people to convince them that I'm the right person, right? And that's the ego at work. But if you're saying, okay, soul story, like, what is the story that like that can help people, that where I can actually be in the most powerful potency of the gift that I have to give to these times? And
Yeah.
where does that story really begin? That one question, where does that story really begin? And for me, it began, and I couldn't have known this if I didn't ask that question. It began because my mother had a friend who hand embroidered this wall hanging on my bedroom wall, and it was of this woman handing out flowers to a kid, and she had literally embroidered, "Give what you have, Leah. To others, it may mean more than you dare to think." I had no idea that that was going to guide my life path. Just
Mm.
living in the question, to others, it may mean more than you dare to think, to give what you have. And so it's you're asking me very practical, logical questions. And as a
Yeah.
storyteller, we don't speak in linear language.
Love
What I can say is is to really like to stop thinking, to go for a walk, to get out your piece of paper, to draw your life map, and to think about what are the critical moments, and to keep asking yourself, where does this story really begin? Why did I want to come to this threshold to give what I have to give?
Yeah.
And what led me here?
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the most relevant stories are those moments of those turning points in our lives where we were deeply struggling, we were coming up against obstacles, and those ones will heavily relate to people that are in the midst of those types of struggles right now, and they'll be able to see yourself in those struggles. And if you were able to find a way through that obstacle by telling that story, you create a possibility that wasn't there a moment ago for people, that there is a way through that obstacle.
It's such a beautiful way of saying that.
And I'm curious, with your perspective around having stories being told through the lens of entrepreneurship and teaching, um, telling personal stories versus telling fictional stories, of just like telling a story of a character for the purpose of teaching, say, a lesson in business, a lesson for healing, and in the invitation for people to think outside of the box of their own reality and their own personal stories, and into a more creative space of just telling stories.
So important. It's like, it's such an ad, it's almost a cliche that there's more truth in fiction, and it's like we have this opportunity to again call on the genius of the story itself when we say, um, we get out of the information seeking mind, and we get
Mm-hmm.
out of that factual seeking mind, and we get out of the critical thinking mind when we give, our listeners the gift of entering into a story where they could get to be carried by it and led by it to the lesson or to the wisdom teaching that you're offering. So I think it's also a way that we can untap our genius, when when we're playing with creativity, where we can think of things that we'd normally never think of. And it's a really fun way to play and to guide and teach.
And when you're working with creators or entrepreneurs or people who are pursuing their life's work, their purpose, their calling, what does that look like? What sort of process do you take them through to help them tell better, more effective stories in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I have 5 different story modalities that I work with, from wisdom stories, vision stories, teaching stories, medicine stories. There's another one that's not coming to mind right now. And when it's someone who's really wants to bring something into the world, I do a very individualized process, where we do a really specific structure and say, okay, what is it that you're wanting to birth into the world? What's your threshold? What are your blocks and barriers? And then how do we engage a creative process to actually move around so that you live in your story in a new way? And I think that's can be one of the most limiting factors, is sometimes we get stuck living in a story, we get stuck playing in a role in a story. And there's so many ways to move forward. We all have, as coaches and guides, we all have different threads that we bring to people. And the one that I do is like, I really love activating people's life force by helping them come into connection with their own creative life force. It's like going to the gas station, getting all fueled up,
Mm,
and then, oh, okay, like how do I engage that life force energy into my life, into my work? How do I infuse it? So it's, for each person, it's so different.
yeah.
But what I've done is I've, everything from producing massive live events to films to theater productions to books. It's like I've had a lot of concrete experience getting things done from A to Z, and I love helping people.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
And do you have any, for anybody that feels blocked creatively when it comes to storytelling and sharing or writing, do you have any tips for them?
I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as just do it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go to the gym. I hate going to the gym if I haven't been there for, 3 months or 6 months. It's just no fun. But when you go every day and you're getting stronger and stronger, it starts to feel really fun.
Yeah.
And same thing with this. I think, a regular practice, having a time that you actually make for it, putting it on your calendar. This is what I'm doing. If you don't want to write that day, really following the flow and be like, well, maybe you need to draw your story. Maybe you need to paint your story. Give yourself a different way in. And the best thing, honestly, is if there's a block that's in your way, play play with the block. If your inner critic is like, I'm not smart enough, someone else has done this, then great. Go play with the critic and say, well, critic, what you got for me? Draw your critic. Give your script. Your critic, usually has a script. They're not very smart, these beings. They only have 1 to 3 lines. So get to say, I am the critic. I'm here to say. And then like let it exercise its thing and see what gift it has to offer.
Mm,
Offer something that's blocking it, but sometimes they want to give you something, and that's why you can't go further. I think of it like a video game. You come to the end of the video game, and then you want to upgrade to the next level. Well, sometimes we get a nice block or berry at the end of the video game to say, well, in order to get through to the next level, you got to cross through this.
yeah.
There's like these initiatory energies, and they stop us from proceeding until we're ready to really thrive at the next level. And so writer's block sucks if you've ever had it. It's really no fun, but it's because there's something that's yearning to happen that hasn't had an opportunity yet. And so when you give it the time and space to do that, it's really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that answer. Um, and it's so true. It's just like, just do it. That would have been the answer. I would also say is you just have to do it. Set your timer for 20 minutes and commit to writing for 20 minutes. And you can channel it in a flow of like, I'm going to tell a story about an event. It could be channeled in a way I'm like, I'm just going to make something up, or I'm going to only write in rhymes, or like you can just give it a theme to tap into a different part of our mind. And then I feel very grateful that I've had a disciplined practice for a long time. And in the last couple of years, like I've written and published 15 of my own kids stories that range from 10 minutes to 45 minutes. We have a Christmas story that's a 90-minute audio movie that I co-wrote with a friend. And it's like my muse is switched on now. And
Yeah.
I don't need to circle around the prey anymore before leaping. It's just like I sit down to the keyboard and it's like the channel's open and the keyboard dances and I don't even know what's happening. It's just like the story comes through me. And if I get stuck, as you said, I'll go for a walk. I'll think about it. I'll sit down with my son and I'll read him what I've written. And then he'll come in with a bunch of ideas that unlock another thing. And it is kind of like, the idea of like, we can't go beyond where we are until there's a certain events have happened or certain things have been unlocked. It's like keys that we have to turn in order to get through the next doorway. And yeah, it's magical. It really is magical. Like the written word to me is like, that is the first, it's the first and most crucial part on the journey of creation, is like taking something that is etheric thought forms and grounding them into the physical world by bringing them down pen to paper and writing them out and giving them life.
So with you on that. And like, I love the phrase writing it down. It's literally like we're taking it out of the ethereal and bringing it down to earth, and we're writing it down to earth. It's like, it's such a great expression. And I love what you talked about too. It's like, oh my God, once that channel is open, and you're getting hit by inspiration, the
Yeah.
only challenge I've had is like how to operate in the everyday world,
Yeah.
because you can get so inspired, and then it comes to that disciplined structure of being able to bring things to completion and
Yeah.
being able to, not take on too many ideas at once,
Yeah.
but it really is like once you get there, the fire hose goes open, and it's a pretty fun, epic place to live from.
It's
It-
fun. It
and
is
then
fun.
and then other people that are in that place come around and you get to play together, and it's like it's a fun way of being.
I agree. And the idea, like the writing it down, I was chatting with a buddy yesterday who's looking to go on tour. He's a professional golfer and he's got all these things lining up. And I was asking him about his plan. I was asking him about his budget. And he's like, yeah. It's all in my head. I'm like, exactly. That's the problem. It's in your head. You have to get it out of your head. You got to take the steps into actually creating what is in your head in the real world. And step one is to write all that shit down so you can see it in front of you, so that you can be supported, so you know what to ask for, so you can see what's needed to actually fulfill on all these steps on the journey. And pen to paper is so powerful. Words are spells. It's just like, that's how we bring magic into the world.
Absolutely. They
Gotta
say
get
that
it out of our head. It's like a
out,
genie trapped in a bottle when it's in our head.
But I think it's like I would think of it as like you want to clear the channel, you want to make as much space as possible for inspiration. So it's like when you're dealing with, oh, I gotta, my itinerary, my schedule, my budget, my blah 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 blah, and that's all like up here. How much space do you have for creative thought?
Yeah,
And
not a
new
lot.
ideas.
Not a lot. It's like the hard drive of our brain is just getting overwhelmed. We gotta. That's why it's beautiful. The tools that we have available for us when we set up that infrastructure and those systems in our lives, we can put those pieces out of our brain and not need to hold on to them, so we can be more available to creativity and inspiration.
And it's one of the things I've actually been really inspired by you is your whole move away from social media. And it's like when we think about how much in the world is distracting us
Yeah,
and taking attention, and also like how much of our time are we spending listening to other people?
yeah,
When I go for walks and I see people plugged into every podcast, great. I mean, I know, but there's so much to be inspired by. But at some point, like, when are you going to allow your own inspiration, your own voice to emerge? And that has to come from a place of not having your system jammed 24/7.
yeah,
Having constant input, other people's words, but a little more input. You live on, you live in nature. It's like
yeah,
I live here. It's like I forget not to take it for granted, but like that's where so much of my inspiration comes from.
yeah.
Going for walks in nature.
Being around creative, fun humans and being in nature and moving the body,
Yep.
exercising just like gets the cogs moving so that we can be open and available.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I know you have, I always like to keep the interviews pretty like rapid fire. I know you have a training coming up. Do you want to share a little bit about that and who that would be for?
Sure. Do you have a program? It's called The Alchemy of Story. And I'm pretty psyched about it. It's like my master's program for people who really want to work with story as a tool for healing and transformation, both for their own personal development and also for people who want to stand as facilitators, guides, and leaders, really pillars of change. And story, as I understand it, is one of the most powerful tools for making sense of the world, but also for really changing the world around us and how we live in it. So it's a program that'll guide you in terms of how to hold powerful space, facilitation. It'll guide you in understanding your own stories and what might be blocking you, or it might also where your triggers might be coming up because if you have an unprocessed, underdeveloped story. You'll also learn about how to work with others who are in trauma or disruption, and you'll learn how to create teaching stories and wisdom stories, and it's supported by over, I think, 18 teachers from around the globe. So just you'll leave with a basket full of tricks and practices and techniques that you can use in your own life and with others.
Amazing. And would you say this would be really best suited for somebody who's already a coach or a therapist or a facilitator, a meditation or yoga teacher, like somebody who is already in the game of facilitating transformation for others or teaching?
Yeah, so I have two tracks, and one of them is for people who want to work with story just from on their own self and their own personal development. And then I have a certification track that's exactly for who you just described, certification for leaders, facilitators, guides, people who really want to understand how to use these tools to support others. So
Beautiful. And when does that start?
we have 5 different modules, and our next module starts in July.
Okay,
So
perfect.
you can either watch the recordings of the first one, or each one stands on its own and it's ready to go.
Awesome. And I will have links wherever you're watching or listening to this. There shall be a link for you to click through and learn more about this. Amazing. And do you have any final words of wisdom you'd love to share, an invitation or a call to action or an exercise that you would like to invite folks to who are listening? These are creators, these are teachers, these are educators, these are people who are trying to make the big difference that they were born to make in the world right now.
Yeah, I love that. The big difference that we're born to make. I think the most critical thing that has been washed out of so many of our lives is respecting the importance of playing. And that when we really make time to play and to create and to play with our own stories, to play with the roles that we're playing in our lives, to play with others when they get all stuck and stagnant or riled, that is inviting improv. That's inviting creativity. That's inviting life. So I think the more that we can actually remember to play together through these transition times, these times of so much that's unknown and shifting, that the stronger and more resilient we become. It's like surfing,
Yeah,
surfers are always in motion, so how do we surf together?
beautiful. Love that. Let's play. What is play for you, everybody? Write down what are 5 ways that you love to play and do those things every single day. Amen. Leah, thank you so much for the conversation, for the inspiration, and I will be sharing the links to your trainings coming up here. And it'd be great to bring you back at some point to teach like a signature workshop to my crew here. I'm sure they'd love it.
Yeah, and
Storytelling,
I can offer up a free master class. We can put a link into that too. That will
amazing.
give an introduction.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you and the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you. And same to you. You're doing great work. So inspiring.
High five.